I'm Eliza Bennett, 32, standing in my grandmother's mansion for our annual family conference, feeling like an alien among relatives dripping in designer labels and luxury watches. My simple blazer and modest jewelry draw condescending whispers and sideways glances despite sharing the same bloodline. 10 years of their mockery about my financial struggles while I silently built my empire. Little do they know what's in my briefcase today. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stick around to see how I finally showed my status-obsessed family what real wealth looks like. My family, the Bennetts, have been fixtures in Boston real estate since the 1920s, when my great-grandfather turned a small inheritance into a budding empire during the post-war boom. By the time my grandmother Elizabeth took over in the 1970s, the Bennett name was synonymous with luxury properties across New England. Unlike her brothers who focused on flash and status, Grandma Elizabeth was a shrewd businesswoman who believed wealth should be quiet and purposeful. My father, her youngest son, inherited her pragmatic approach. He fell in love with my mother, a kindergarten teacher with no family money, causing quite the scandal among the status-conscious Bennetts. They chose a modest life in a small suburb, much to the family's dismay. Dad worked as an architect, designing homes he believed people would actually love living in rather than status symbols, while Mom continued teaching. They taught me that money was a tool, not a personality trait. When I was 15, they died in a car accident coming home from a weekend trip, and my world collapsed overnight. Grandma Elizabeth took me in while my aunts and uncles whispered that I'd become the charity case of the family. In those first painful months, I'd often find Grandma in her study late at night, looking through old photo albums or reviewing property portfolios. "Eliza," she would say, "most of the family has forgotten what wealth is actually for. They think it's about showing off, but real wealth is invisible. It's security, opportunity, and the power to affect change." During the 3 years I lived with her before college, she taught me more about finance, investment, and property valuation than any course ever could. She showed me how to read market trends, identify undervalued properties, and most importantly, how to be patient. My cousins, Brad, Victoria, Taylor, Jessica, and Blake, grew up very differently. Uncle Richard, who took over as family patriarch after Grandpa died, believed in conspicuous consumption. His children, and those of my other aunts and uncles, received sports cars for their 16th birthdays, took luxury vacations every school break, and wore only designer clothes. Meanwhile, I drove the used Toyota my parents had left me, worked part-time jobs, and invested every penny I could spare. Grandma Elizabeth passed away during my senior year of college, leaving each grandchild a modest inheritance, while my cousins used theirs for down payments on luxury condos, exotic vacations, or even more ridiculous. Blake bought a small yacht he barely uses. I followed my grandmother's advice. I lived simply in a small apartment, continued working, and strategically invested my inheritance in small, overlooked properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods. The annual family conference began as Grandma Elizabeth's way of ensuring family unity and shared purpose. After her death, Uncle Richard transformed it into a display of status competition, who had the most impressive portfolio update, who had acquired the most expensive possessions, which cousin had the most impressive career trajectory. Every year, I would show up in my modest clothes, share my deliberately understated updates, and endure their thinly veiled pity. What none of them knew was that by my 28th birthday, my portfolio had grown to include 12 residential properties and 3 small commercial buildings, all purchased through anonymous LLCs with the guidance of Grandma's old lawyer, Mr. Winters. Last year, I learned that the sprawling apartment complex where Uncle Richard's daughter Victoria, my cousin Blake, and 3 other family members lived had gone on the market. The owner was retiring and looking for a quiet sale to avoid alarming tenants. Using a holding company structure Mr. Winters helped establish, I purchased the building for $28 million, nearly every cent of my available capital. I implemented subtle improvements while keeping my ownership completely anonymous, even raising rent slightly, though well below market rate. And now, as I prepared for this year's conference, I received word that Uncle Richard planned to propose selling Grandma's mansion, the heart of our family legacy and the last physical connection to her wisdom. The same mansion where I'm now, standing, watching my family flaunt their wealth, completely unaware that the poor relation they've mocked for years owns the very roof over many of their heads. I pulled up to Grandma's mansion on Friday afternoon in my 10-year-old Toyota, the same car I'd been driving since college. The circular driveway already gleamed with luxury vehicles. Brad's new Maserati parked prominently near the front steps. Aunt Catherine's Mercedes SUV, Uncle Richard's Bentley, and various other high-end cars that probably cost more than most people's houses. I parked between Blake's Range Rover and Victoria's BMW, my Toyota looking like it had accidentally wandered into the wrong neighborhood. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed down my simple navy blazer from Banana Republic and checked my minimal makeup in the rearview mirror. The mansion looked exactly as it always had. 3 stories of elegant brick Georgian architecture, with white columns flanking the entrance and perfectly manicured gardens stretching across 4 acres. Walking up the limestone steps, I felt a familiar blend of warmth and apprehension. This place had been my sanctuary after losing my parents, but now it represented the widening gulf between my life choices and those of my relatives. I'd arrived purposely early, hoping to soak in some peaceful memories before the full family circus descended. Martha, the housekeeper who had served our family for over 30 years, opened the door before I could even ring the bell. "Miss Eliza," she beamed, pulling me into a warm hug that smelled of lemon furniture polish and cinnamon. "So wonderful to see you. You look more like your grandmother every year." I smiled genuinely for the first time that day. "Thanks, Martha. You're still the best welcome committee this place has." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "You might want to know that Mr. Richard has been here since morning, rearranging the conference schedule and meeting with the family attorney." This wasn't surprising, but confirmed my suspicions about the mansion sale. Martha helped me carry my weekend bag to my old room, the one I'd lived in during those formative years with Grandma. Unlike the other guest rooms that had been redecorated multiple times, this one remained largely unchanged. The same pale blue walls, white furniture, and window seat overlooking the rose garden that Grandma had loved so much. I ran my fingers over the bookshelf still holding my old favorites, finance textbooks mingling with novels, the notebook where Grandma had taught me to track stock movements, and the small framed photo of my parents and me at Cape Cod the summer before they died. I was unpacking when a knock came at the door. My cousin Jessica stood there, the only family member who'd ever shown me consistent kindness. "Thought I heard you arrive," she smiled, leaning against the doorframe. Unlike our other cousins, Jessica had built her own career as a pediatrician, though she still maintained the expected level of family luxury. She wore designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my entire outfit, but her eyes held none of the judgment I usually faced. "I wanted to warn you before everyone shows up. Uncle Richard has big plans this weekend. He's going to propose selling the mansion." Though I'd suspected this, hearing it confirmed made my stomach sink. "But this place is our heritage. Grandma would never have wanted that." Jessica sighed, coming to sit beside me on the bed. "I know. But he's talking about unlocking the property value and modernizing family assets. He's already got most of the votes lined up." Votes. The Bennett family governance structure was another of Uncle Richard's innovations after Grandma passed. Family decisions were weighted by one's contribution to the overall family holdings, meaning Richard, as the most commercially successful, effectively controlled most decisions. My small declared holdings gave me minimal voting power. "Is that why we're meeting for 3 days instead of the usual 2? I asked. Jessica nodded. "Property discussions Saturday, financial reviews Sunday, and the big vote Monday. He's bringing in developers to present concepts for luxury condos where the mansion would be." My heart sank. This place wasn't just a building. It was the last physical connection to Grandma's wisdom and values. The thought of it being demolished for yet more high-end real estate felt almost sacrilegious. "I'm going to fight this," I said quietly. Jessica squeezed my hand. "I know, and I'll back you. But be prepared for resistance." She glanced at her watch. "Everyone's gathering for dinner in 20 minutes. Victoria's already asked twice if the poor cousin has arrived yet." I forced a smile. Wouldn't want to disappoint her. After Jessica left, I took a moment to center myself. I'd come to this conference with a plan, but now the stakes felt even higher. Dinner that evening was exactly as expected. Crystal glasses, fine china, and conversation designed to highlight everyone's latest achievements. Uncle Richard held court at the head of the table where Grandma used to sit, talking about his latest development project. Completely sold out before construction even finished, he boasted, swirling his 30-year-old scotch. We had to turn away buyers. Aunt Catherine chimed in about her charity gala that had raised more than last year's by $100,000, while pointedly noting that she hadn't seen Eliza's name on any philanthropic donor lists lately. My cousin Brad, now an executive at Uncle Richard's company solely due to nepotism, kept directing the conversation toward his new Maserati. The waiting list was 9 months, but they expedited for our family name, he smirked, glancing at me. What are you driving these days, Eliza? Still that Toyota? I took a sip of water. Still serving me perfectly well. Uncle Richard's wife Patricia made a sympathetic clicking sound. You know, dear, if you'd just let Richard mentor you in some property investments, you could afford to upgrade your lifestyle a bit. I bit back the urge to inform her that my property investments were doing just fine without Richard's mentoring. Instead, I simply smiled. I'm comfortable with my choices. The subtle digs continued throughout dinner, references to exclusive clubs I didn't belong to, comparisons of vacation homes I didn't own, discussions of private school options for cousins' children that I couldn't afford if I had kids. Despite it all, I maintained my hope that once they understood the full picture, there might be a path to genuine family connection. After dinner, I walked the grounds alone, visiting Grandma's rose garden now illuminated by soft landscape lighting. Standing there among her carefully cultivated flowers, I resolved again to preserve her legacy, both the physical mansion and the values she'd instilled in me. Whatever happened this weekend, I would find a way to honor her memory, even if it meant finally revealing what I'd been building all these years in the shadows. Saturday morning arrived with golden autumn sunshine streaming through the curtains of my childhood bedroom. I dressed carefully in black slacks and a simple blue blouse, professional but not showy. The main family conference would begin at 9 in the grand drawing room, where generations of Bennetts had made decisions that shaped our family fortune. Entering the room, I immediately felt the shift in atmosphere. The usual family portraits had been removed from the walls, replaced with architectural renderings of modern condominiums. Uncle Richard stood at the front beside a digital projector, while my cousins and their spouses filled the antique chairs arranged in a semicircle. Several faces I didn't recognize sat in the back row, presumably the developers Jessica had mentioned. "Ah, Eliza, good of you to join us," Uncle Richard announced as I slipped into a seat beside Jessica. We were just about to begin our discussion on family image and standards. I nodded politely, noticing how several cousins exchanged glances when I sat down. Richard launched into his presentation, clicking through slides that showed the Bennett Family Holdings logo, emblazoned on increasingly luxurious buildings. "Image is currency in our world," he proclaimed, pacing in his Italian leather shoes. That probably cost more than my monthly rent. The Bennett name opens doors, but only if we maintain certain standards in how we present ourselves to the world. His gaze lingered meaningfully on me for a moment before continuing. After discussing several development projects already in progress, he advanced to a slide labeled Family Residence Reassessment. My heart sank as a beautifully photographed image of Grandma's mansion appeared on screen. As you all know, this property has been in our family for 4 generations. While it holds sentimental value, it's sitting on 5 acres of prime real estate currently valued at approximately $45 million. Aunt Victoria, elegant in her designer suit with perfectly highlighted hair, raised her manicured hand. "Richard, before you continue, I think we should acknowledge that some family members might be emotionally attached to the old house." She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Eliza, dear, I know you lived here for a time and we all respect that, but surely you understand that sentimentality can't stand in the way of sound financial decisions?" Before I could respond, my cousin Blake jumped in. "Speaking of sound, financial decisions, has anyone seen my new SL Roadster outside? Just picked it up yesterday. Limited edition, only 20 in North America." The not-so-subtle topic change was clearly designed to emphasize the gap between my financial status and theirs. Very nice, Richard nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of statement piece that reinforces our family's position in the community. He then continued with his presentation, outlining a plan to sell the mansion, divide the proceeds among family shareholders, weighted by current holdings naturally, and develop luxury condominiums on the property. The developers in the back row began distributing glossy brochures showing renderings of glass and steel structures, bearing no resemblance to the warm brick home that had sheltered generations of our family. The projected return on investment is substantial, Richard concluded triumphantly. Any questions before we move to preliminary voting? I raised my hand, and Richard acknowledged me with barely concealed impatience. I think we should consider Grandma Elizabeth's wishes, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. She specifically wanted this house preserved as our family gathering place and historical anchor. She told me many times that not everything should be measured by its potential return on investment. Uncle Richard's smile tightened. While Elizabeth had many admirable qualities, the market has changed considerably since her time. What made sense then doesn't necessarily make sense now. Aunt Catherine tittered. Besides, Eliza, with your limited experience in high value real estate, perhaps this isn't an area where your input carries much weight, I persisted. I've analyzed the property values and neighborhood trends. This location's historic value actually increases its worth as a preserved property, rather than being demolished for yet another luxury development that might sit half-empty like the Westbrook project did last year. The room fell silent for a moment before Brad gave a short, dismissive laugh. Analysis? What would you know about real estate? You can't even afford a house of your own. You're still renting that little apartment downtown, aren't you? Several cousins snickered, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks. My housing choices are deliberate, not limitations, I replied, but Brad talked over me. Sure they are. Just like my choice to drive a $150,000 car instead of a 10-year-old Toyota is deliberate. Some of us can afford our choices, cousin. Others just pretend their limitations are choices. Richard cleared his throat, not to defend me but to move the discussion along. Let's take a preliminary vote on the concept of selling and redeveloping. We can address specific proposals after lunch. The vote was exactly as Jessica had predicted, overwhelmingly in favor of selling, with only Jessica and me opposed. As we broke for lunch, I felt a crushing weight of disappointment. It wasn't just about losing the house, it was the realization that my family truly saw me as nothing more than the poor relation, someone whose opinion had no value because her bank account didn't impress them. Jessica found me in the garden during lunch, sitting on the stone bench where Grandma used to tell me stories about our family's history. I'm sorry, she said, sitting beside me. They can be such snobs. I nodded, fighting back tears. It's not even about the money. They've never bothered to ask what I actually do with my life or why I make the choices I make. They just assume I'm struggling and failing to keep up. Jessica squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I've always admired how you've charted your own path.